Yo, yo, can y'all hear me out there? Can y'all hear me? Broadcasting live from the Method Made Design Lab. Welcome to the Method Makers Podcast, Season 2. This episode is 3 years in the making. A friend and extended family member to the Method Makers, artist, visual storyteller, and advocate for creating a positive impact in all that she does. Callie Curry, better known as Swoon, joins us today. We discuss various topics. Where did Swoon get her name? How she got into doing art in the street, her installation project work in museums and in water, the convict shelter humanitarian project in Commie, Haiti, the work she's doing with her nonprofit, the Heliotrope Foundation. We talk about her various goals and a special project that she's doing with PBS. So without further delay, we present to you, Swoon. Alrighty, thank you guys so much. We are at Season 2 of the Method Makers Podcast, and it's been, I want to say, almost 3 years in the making to have this conversation recorded. I am just delighted to introduce Callie Swoon.
Thank
How
you.
do you like to be introduced?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's perfect.
Okay, awesome. Well, Callie, thank you so much for joining.
It's so good to join you.
Yes,
I'm so glad that after meeting up in San Francisco and just like connecting and meeting the whole family, that like we carried the thread through and that we made it happen.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I cherish that memory a lot. And at the time that we were trying to like get things in motion to actually record, and then the time had passed, it was one of those things that I felt like I just kind of knew in my heart that if I reached out, like you would be open to trying to reconnect, because I shared something that was so deep and personal with you. Like I was talking to you before we hit the record button. There's like, dude, I went like 15, 20 videos in and read some articles, and man, like even before that talk, you've always been deep. I want to say like, man, you're like an excavator. Like
I love that.
You're like you got like you're the character in the Looney Tunes cartoons that's digging that hole all the way to China. Like you are so deep.
Oh my God, I love that.
Dope. So how did it start for you? I know that you studied art, or you
studied painting at Pratt.
At Pratt, right. How did the transition happen? How did it start from the early days?
Working on the street?
Yeah.
Well, I'd been a little kid studying classical painting, and I was, talk about before social media, I was, studying before the internet. So my whole concept of what art could be was like a square on a wall. And then I got to New York and I was like, whoosh, what? All of a sudden New York just redefined what art could be for me. And I just was like, oh my God, and not only by graffiti artists like Revs or sculptors like, I'm blanking on his name. Anyway, amazing, like site specific sculptors, changing what I thought art could be, but also the city itself was like this artwork. It was like this beehive of this like buzzing energy. And there was all these like collages out on the walls. And I was like, wait, this collage? I was like, nobody can make this collage. This just happens. It's a force of nature, right? And so there was this feeling of like, this is the artwork. Like I gotta get here. And so it just started like that. Just me being like, art can't be what it used to be for me, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once your brain gets expanded, it's not ain't going back in the box. Forget that, and so it was just like this thing of like, I have to make something that like just responds to all this inspiration. And so I started making these block prints, and I kind of studied for a while. I was a little methodical. I took like 3 months where I was an exchange student. I lived by myself in Amsterdam on like a little sailboat, and I didn't like make any friends, and I had saved money, so I didn't even have a job. I just like went to the library every single day, and I would read about site specific art and the Mexican mural movement and all these different ways of like dematerializing the art object. And every day I would carve these blocks. And I was like, when I get back to New York, I'm going to do this whole poster series on the streets. And then I got back, and I think because I had built it up in my head for so long, it like bombed. It just fell totally flat. And I was like, oh, fuck, you know? Um, but then I had all this imagery and I had kind of this obsession. So then I started making these stickers, and those
Okay.
things got in my head. They look like Easter egg. And I just, like, the obsession just took. And then it got bigger from there, and billboards and posters, and it just kept going.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think well, the wheat paste stencils that I saw, it was just one color. It was like the color
Yeah,
of the paper.
the white paper. That was
Yeah,
probably like that was probably 2 years in at least. Because first I was
okay.
doing the collages with the block print, and then I wanted to make giant block prints, but I was waitressing, and like a sheet of linoleum was like $100 back then, which was like my whole week. You know what I mean? That was a lot of
Yeah.
money. So so I was like, but a single sheet of paper is 20 cents. So I would just roll out like a bunch of sheets of paper, and I would cut that out into the shape, and then paste those around.
Okay. So, how did it transition? I mean, today, I don't know about today, but at least the video that I saw from 2019, you were still doing wheat paste. Are you still in the street
Nope,
doing wheat paste? Okay.
not at all. I actually stopped 3 years ago, and it's one of those things where it's almost
Oh.
like a discipline that I have stopped. Like today I was like riding by a bunch of walls, like looking around, and I was like, no. And the reason that I'm being like that is that I need to grow other parts of my brain. And it's like, if I don't let go of that street pasting, you know, the street pasting formed everything I did. It was all I thought about for like 20 years. You know what I mean? It was like every work that I made had to be XYZ type of way to go out on the street. You know, everything, all your time, oh, you're looking spots, you're doing this, you're that. It dominates your creative field so much that it felt like this thing where I was like, if I don't open my hand and set this down, I cannot take something else new into my hand. And so I'm very like, no street pasting. Like maybe again one day it'll come back, but like right now I'm like it's like a practice to be like, I'm not doing that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I could imagine that takes discipline because I hang out with a lot of street artists.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an obsession. Of course, it's an obsession.
Yeah.
But you know, I also have some other obsessions that are like coming in, so it's kind of all good.
Okay. Okay, good. So then what is the other part of your brain that you are trying to expand, that you're, do tell, what is that exercise that's happening right now?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm learning filmmaking and storytelling.
Okay.
I had this weird experience where I do these kinds of therapies that we've talked a little bit about, and sometimes I can't really sleep after one of the therapy sessions. And so one night, just to try to like talk myself down to sleep, I started telling myself like a children's story about my own life. It was like I'd just done all this work on this particular period of my life. So then as I was falling asleep, I was like, they lived in this house and there was this mud and these scary people and all these things, and I was telling myself this sort of spooky fairy tale about this like 6-year-old girl and what she has to deal with. And then I woke up in the morning and I was like, yeah, I'm writing this shit down. And then for like a month, my brain was just, bah, 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 you're right. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not a writer. This is so weird. That's why I talk about it like it was like an experience. It was almost like a thing that happened where it was just like, duh, 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 you're writing. And I was like, man, I don't know what's happening. But it was like that thing where I had set one thing down and like something else could come in. And so I set that story aside because naturally it wasn't like that good because I'm not like a writer, but it also had life. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I set it aside, but it wouldn't go away. It wouldn't come or go, you know, it was just kind of like, and then a couple years later, I was like, I had taught myself stop motion animation. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and start working on this. And so I'm still like hella far back. Like it's still like that's at the beginning stages, you know, but I'm just like doing all this like super fun collaboration with like, you know, writers and storytellers and just like different people to just be like, what is this art form?
That's dope. I remember you were talking about that in your talk. Like in 2000, late 2018, you had mentioned stop motion animation. I think you actually
Yes.
played one for us, right?
Yes, I had just started at that point. I had spent like one summer just starting to teach myself. And then I spent another summer the following summer. Um, and then now I'm kind of like trying to take it a little further, and I'm trying to teach myself. I'm sort of just trying to invent for myself what long form figurative stop motion with like speaking characters would look like.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and who knows? Like, I'm not trying to go like Tim Burton style with the 10 billion changed faces and like the $70 million budget over 5 years or whatever. That's like that's a whole other level. I still want to live in like some kind of raw storytelling spaces, but I do want to get towards like, well, what would it look like if I let a whole story play out with like narrative and characters and
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to see, and we will definitely be happy to repost, re-interview, whatever you want to do. Use our platform as your platform. This is for
nice,
everybody.
right?
Um, Excited to see what that comes out at.
Yeah,
I'm actually just going off the top right now, and it occurred to me that you recently did something with Alicia Keys,
yeah,
which when we were getting close to the time that we were going to film this, I was like, holy shit.
yeah.
That's pretty big. I wonder if, I think I messaged you and I was like, is there anything, any particular project you want to talk about? And
Mhm.
I guess I just assumed that this was probably something, but you did mention there's another thing that you haven't even
Yeah,
talked about yet that you probably will,
yeah,
but maybe you could talk about the project. I mean, just the Alicia
yeah.
Keys thing.
Definitely. Um, so I have known, so Swiss Beats and Alicia Keys are art collectors.
Yeah.
And that's how I have come to know them. Swiss Beats is her husband, also a music producer, and Alicia needs no introduction also. Um, and both of them. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so they started collecting my art back in 2014, which was amazing and a
Awesome.
huge thing. And I got to know them. They um have had a lot of fun wild times over the years. At one point, me and Maya Hayek, Swiss Beats threw me and Maya Hayek a birthday party in Miami back in 2014, and it was completely insane. And I got thrown out of my own birthday party. I was like, oh, this is like some rock star shit right here. I'm getting like completely tossed from my own birthday party. And then I took it to this other place. This is like this whole outrageous, super fun night. Very different
Wow.
than how I live my normal life. I'm very like down to
Right.
earth otherwise. But this time I was like, okay, we're doing this. So I've had like some real fun with those guys, and also they invited me to something called the Black Ball, which is Alicia Keys has this project for years where she has helped to raise fund for AIDS medication in Africa because just there was so much inequality with
Hmm.
people's access to that stuff. So she performed at this event 8 months pregnant, and I'm like there just in the front row because it's this private event, so I'm just sitting there like watching Alicia Keys 8 months pregnant on stage performing, dancing, singing.
Crazy.
I mean, it was like I'm literally getting goosebumps talking about it. I was like, this woman is a fucking goddess, like literally. And she's like living her art, and she's being a mother, and she's just being these things. It just like
Man.
I just had never seen anything like it. And so that night I get home and I'm texting Swiss and I'm like, please, I have to paint Alicia one day. Like I was like, I want to paint her now while she's pregnant. They were like, okay, maybe not this minute, but I think they were. I like kind of planted the seed. Like, come on, like please, that woman is just such a being, you know.
Yep.
So such a being of light. And so I just was like, I want to do this. And then years later, Alicia was about to release her album, and she had this song called Underdog that was like kind of about
Mhm.
like basically just like how it feels to connect with people who are like in a place where they're having a hard time, and just like what it means to like pause and look at somebody and talk to somebody and connect with like our fellow humans. And so she thought of my work because I think because of that kind of connection, like that's so central to my work, to like portraits and just connecting with people and like drawing people and pasting those portraits back out on the street. And and just like the level of humanity that I hope is present in my work, I feel like was something that she saw and received. And so she was like, hey, I would love for you to be involved in this. And so we did a music video, like a little commercial basically, for the song, which was so awesome. And these animators like put together my all my drawings and did this thing, and that was really fun. And then I was like, yeah, guys, shouldn't I paint a portrait of Alicia as part of this campaign? And they were like, okay. So we did the photo shoot. It was super fun. You know, Alicia is one of those people that I feel like, you know, you talked about evolving and growing like as a spirit. And she's one of those people who, for me, who like is who she says she is. And what I mean is like she's like trying to put that light out in the world, and she's doing the work every day. She's doing the meditating, she's doing the like being involved in these projects. She's it's true, like the whole process, you know. And she's like being glamorous and having all the fun and doing all the things, right? But like at the
Yep.
core of that, the thing that sustains like why the glamour is like still fun and there is this like spiritual core of like intense, you know, just like dedication to your work and dedication to compassion and to growing yourself. And so, you know, whenever I'm like around her for any period of time, I always like, get that sense. I'm like, that's what's up with this human. Like that's where we bond. And so, um, yeah, so I just like, you know, took a bunch of pictures. I paint and draw from pictures. I decided to do a painting because I had stopped doing block printing, you know, and that was like a major change. And so I took on doing a painting. And you know, it's one of those things I'm always like, oh, I wish I had more practice, because it's so different and difficult to do something like paint Alicia, right? Than to paint like a stranger, where you see my painting of a stranger and you're like, oh, you captured the spirit, but you don't know who that person is, right?
Yeah.
But to be like, oh, you captured the spirit and it's Alicia Keys, you know, that's it. It's like it's such a taller order that it definitely was like a big challenge. But you know,
Yeah.
and then like and then Zara did this whole like reveal, and they like filmed Alicia like seeing the painting for the first time. And I mean, that was so moving. Like, of course I cried. I mean, the things she said, it was so sweet. Like to the point where like sometimes when stuff like that happens, I'm almost like not experiencing it, because I'm like, this is too awesome. This is too awesome. I'm just gonna like be like, yeah, okay, that happened, I guess. You know, you're like, but yeah, it was incredible. It was a huge honor.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go check on Callie, see what's go. Oh my God. Like, and I was like, she just did what? I think it was like 4 hours after
Yeah.
the time that you posted it. And I just said, holy shit, you know, and then I immediately reposted it, and I was like, dude, we're gonna fucking interview Callie. And I have to ask her about this, you know, because
Yeah.
you know, like, what is that like? And man,
Yeah.
that just, it sounds amazing. I mean, I put myself in your shoes and I'm already crying, like thinking,
Mm.
how the man, it just it's
Yeah.
amazing. So
It's one of those things where I just feel like I have to like appreciate it, and also just be like, just keep going, you know. But yeah, but really appreciating it. Try, you know, it's almost like you have to pause. I have to pause to be like, what, to sort of feel the honor but not get overwhelmed, you know, not get
right.
shook by like what's the like task that you're, you know, like I was saying, being like, how do you represent, how do you make it embody this person and show up as them, and all these different things. And then, you know, how do you really appreciate the honor that is represented when somebody speaks so sincerely and passionately about your work and shares it with the world that way? And
Yeah.
yeah, just like try to like, I just have to like take a deep breath and just be like, don't miss this, you know, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes when something is really awesome, I can weirdly, I can almost shut down. It's like you try to, you're like, how do I appreciate this moment? And weirdly, one of my responses can sometimes be able to be like, it's fine, nothing's happening, nothing special.
So there's no like stop and enjoy the roses moment
Well,
for you?
that's what I have to remember to stop it
Yeah.
in the roses, because my natural tendency is almost to like clamp down. It's like, oh, it's right, whatever. And I have to be like, no, like, don't be afraid to appreciate the things that are happening, you know, because
Yeah.
then it's like, you guys are like, okay, take a deep breath, like be happy. Like, don't be afraid to be happy. Don't be afraid to be like, wow, good things are happening. Like, I don't have to pretend they're not happening so that to not jinx them or something, you know?
Yep, yep. Yeah, man. I just ah, man, that's awesome. um I mean, I think about all of the things that you've done in the past 20 years of your career. And I people can just go to your website, or they can just type Swoon, Cali, whatever. And if anyone wants to do the research that I attempted to try and do, they'll see like the things on the Hudson River, the things in Venice, like the sculptures. I mean the structures that you've built, continue to build,
Mhm.
and like the homes in, was it in Haiti where the earthquake happened? Man, I'm just like watching, it feels like a mini documentary of what some of these people are saying about the work that you were doing out there. And then you're talking about how you underestimated the fact that this was going to turn into a much longer, lifelong relationship, years,
Decade,
decades. Yeah.
decade. Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, I just, man, I guess I kind of want to ask about that. Like, what has transpired, and like, obviously the earthquake was the thing that maybe started the reason why you wanted to go there. But how did the connection from that, and like, where are things at today? Like, are you still in contact with the communities that you uh
Hmm.
and your team, your friends were helping with out there?
Yeah. Yes. So the project in Haiti started because of the earthquake, and it started because me and a bunch of friends had been building these rafts, and the rafts were so dangerous and difficult and involved so insanely much problem solving, and so much of people being like, yeah, that's not possible, and us being like, watch us, that I was like, wait, we're like getting some skills under our belt here, and we're learning that, like, in difficult shifting circumstances, like, here's how you adapt, here's how you respond, here's how you resolve things, here's how you come together as a team, here's how you raise money, here's how you be an art community that's like addressing things. And so when the earthquake happened, I was like, we can help. Like, this is, you
It's
so
dope.
many times a crisis happens and you don't always feel that way. Sometimes you feel like, oh shit, a crisis just happened and I am in no position. But that was just one of those unique times when, my partner at the time wanted to just go as a first responder. And I was like, hey, wait, like, I don't know if we have the skills as first responders. I think we're second line. But I just knew, I was like, I think we can do this. I think this is one of those times where all the circumstances are aligning and we can raise money from the art world, not from first aid. We can bring in new resources, new energy, new skills, all the things that are needed in a crisis, and we can be involved in the rebuilding. And so we got together and we connected with a community. At first we were thinking about buildings and structures, and we ended up making buildings and building structures. But what I learned is that after a crisis on that magnitude, I mean, that it was just unparalleled devastation. um that, you lose your buildings, but you also lose your roads, your sewage, your jobs. You lose all this social structure.
Mhm.
People have to move out, out of the cities and back to the country where they grew up. And so we ended up connecting with a small village in the countryside, and I was like, oh, the actual most important thing that we did was provide meaningful paid work. It was like social cohesion, it was economic resources. It was this moment of building together that was more important than any house or structure that we built. The houses or structures were kind of a means to house people, but also to be like, we're doing this together, come on everybody. And we were able to employ, the first day that we opened up for, building, and we connected with this guy locally who, he was Haitian, but he lived part-time in Canada, so he was able to kind of speak both languages, both culturally and in language. And so he was like, here's what we're going to do. And his grandfather was kind of like the head dude of that village. So he had
Wow.
all the social capital, and he was like, I'm going to introduce you, here's how we're going to do this. And he helped us facilitate everything. And he was like, the most important thing people need is work, so we're going to put out a job call. And 70 people came, and we were like, what do we do? And he was like, just break up the shifts. And we ended up hiring every single person that showed up that day for different
Wow.
amounts of time. And so,
That's cool.
and what that meant was that we essentially hired like a third of the village. So every home in the village was essentially affected by this event, and, got resources, got to participate in this thing. Um, and so once you're like that deep working with a community side by side day after day, you know, we stayed for 6 weeks the first time and then kept coming back. And I remember this moment of clarity where my partner at the time was like, this is not about the buildings, this is a relationship. And I knew that that was true. And so we have stayed, you know, I started a nonprofit called Heliotrope, the Heliotrope Foundation, that's basically about how do artists address crisis. It's about artists' response to crisis in all different kinds of ways. Um, and one of the things that that it does is continue the work in Haiti, but we actually haven't been able to go back since COVID and even before COVID because there were fuel riots were happening, and so we haven't physically been in Haiti in I would say 2 years, at least a year and a half.
Wow.
But what we have continued to do is to support an after school program and COVID education through the after school program.
Oh, nice. Is
Yeah.
there other I was going to ask about your foundation. Are there other I guess you talk about crisis. Is it obviously COVID being one, and I guess that's part of the reason that you're doing this education. Are there anything is there any other, sort of social causes, other things that are on the docket that you guys
Mm.
are slated to work on project wise?
Well, so there were kind of the three core projects that we worked on, and then in the last couple of years we started to focus, or I personally started to focus, and then gradually Heliotrope started to get involved in um, the kind of social crisis around understanding trauma and understanding addiction,
Mm,
and understanding the traumatic roots of so many behaviors that our society punishes,
mm,
and trying to get perspective on the fact that when people are acting out in damaging ways, what they need is healing, not punishment. um, and so we've been involved, you know, in small ways. Like one of our collaborators just made this beautiful zine about healing trauma and we distributed it for free, and that was a kind of a small gesture during COVID. But there's a town called Braddock where I worked for many, many years. We did tile making. We were trying to fix this church, and then in the last couple of years, I realized that the physical structure of the church is beyond me, and that I'm not. I had to set that project down, which was a little painful. But in that thing that we have been kind of a theme is you set something down and something else comes into that space. And so what happened while we were working on, okay, how do we transition these spaces, you know, who in the community should take over these spaces, we got in touch with this incredible woman who started a project called Zakaya House. And she is a woman who was formerly incarcerated, who has been through an incredible amount in her life, but who's one of those incredible people who has come out the other side of her trauma and the trouble that she got into because of her trauma, to now understand healing and community building and togetherness. And so she now, her work
wow.
in life is that she starts homes, like reentry homes for people coming out of prison, and they have trauma therapy, they have all these kind of social programs to help people get back on their feet. And gets she gets it. Like she knows. It's like she truly gets. I don't even know her religion, but I would say that, like, if there was a like what Christianity is supposed to mean, it's this woman. Like, she's the fucking person who's like, this is whatever you're trying to talk about, the spirit of forgiveness, compassion, taking care of your neighbor, like not letting anyone fall through the cracks, like treating every person with respect. That is her work. And so we just, like, 2 weeks ago, I'm so excited, transferred the home in Braddock to her, and it's about to become a house for women who are coming out of prison.
That is
Isn't
awesome.
it cool? I'm so
Congratulations.
excited. Yes.
Oh my God.
It's like I couldn't have imagined a better outcome. And we're going to continue to support her
Beautiful.
and stay with her through the process. You know, Heliotrope will be a partner for her.
That's so amazing. I mean, uh yeah, you're saying I don't know what it would be for Christianity. Like you're trying to describe, you don't know what she is. It's like, you're talking about Jesus, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm like,
Jesus.
whatever Jesus was trying to teach, she does that.
Yeah.
I don't know what her religion is or anyone else in this conversation, but like I do understand the sort of core principles that all of the world religions are trying to talk about. And I'm like, that's that. If you
Yeah.
had to be like, how do I live that? It's like what this woman is doing,
Her.
essentially.
Yes.
Her. Yeah.
That's awesome. So to try to shift, but also assemble the cohesion of what I'm trying to form here. Social change. So Remy and I started the Method Made Design Lab, which is right behind me. This it's basically like a culmination of her 20 years of experience with all the creative things that she's done, from design, photography, all the websites she's built for all the businesses we've had together, and all the companies she's worked for, and myself in a different aspect. I call her the brains and the bronze, and I'm just the mouth, so hence the podcast. But the work that we are doing is very unique. So we work with GATS, and when we went to your show, and I hope he won't kill me for saying this, but GATS and I were there at your show, and I think he had mentioned that this is actually a separate question that I'll probably have to ask later. So the Method Made Design Lab specifically is our consulting arm of what we are trying to do for businesses, organizations, artists, essentially anybody that is looking to revamp their brands. So we consider it brand consulting for businesses,
Mm-hmm.
but we have a very specific thing that we're trying to do with the brand consulting that we do. We're actually trying to integrate social change into the brand consulting work that we do. So
Mm-hmm.
for instance, you could be a tech company that sells software, and it's very plain and simple that that's what you do. But like, in the depth of the company are the people that run it. And what people don't know is that the founder of this company actually had parents who were homeless. And for him, he has a soft spot for helping the homeless and wanting to do more. And he doesn't know how to talk about how this particular story and his connection, and like, maybe there's like donations every single year from his company proceeds that go to that, but he doesn't know how to connect that to his company. So what we're trying to basically do is find companies that do this, that not necessarily are nonprofits or for profit or whatever. It's just, what we're essentially trying to do is find ways to take social change and integrate that into the brand consulting work that we do. So we do these case studies. We're currently up to 3. And what we're finding is that a lot of businesses are trying to shift. Like, they're trying to show that there is a way that, through the work that they do, it's not just about making more money and profit and, and like growth of the company and year over year, like this and that, more and more and more. It's like, where does that money go? Like, where, like, how do you find ways to shift that energy and then put it into something that makes sense? And so
And also, what's at the root of the work that you're doing in the first place? Like, why? Like,
exactly.
what's interesting is, sorry to interrupt, but an aside
No,
that's
no.
related is, so the talks that I give, like the one in San Francisco where I'm talking a lot about my personal experience, I became empowered to do that by working with these people called the Million Person Project. And their sort of philosophy is that no matter what you're doing, even if it's, you have a company that I don't know, whatever, you have a company, then you're a business,
Yeah.
whatever. That if you get to the root of it, like you were saying, okay, so maybe somebody had parents who are homeless, and like, okay, so this person has a company, and maybe it's like a shoe company, and it's not a parent, but you're like, oh, but they do what the culture of their office is about bringing people together. It, the quality of their product is about making people feel safe and secure. Whatever it is, that sometimes when you start to dig back in, that you can find that there are these kind of core values that are driving what you're doing, even if it doesn't seem apparent at first. But that if you can
Right.
get people to consciously make that connection, then they can then turn around and make their work more true to those core values. And I found that 100% when I started working with them, and then I started telling my story more in my personal work. Now I'm so much more dedicated to what my sort of core mission is, so much more clear to me. And I think you guys will probably start to find that as you're working with people to try to find the sort of social change core of their work, is that it may even be about, well, what drove them to start that company in the first place, or what are some of the values of the company that they don't even realize are actually more deeply connected to their just like core beliefs. And that if we can start
Yeah.
to bring that stuff into the, even just like the business world, then all of a sudden we're creating these more humane spaces of work, of commerce, that we're not just like doing this kind of purely capitalist like drive to the top.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask you a question. Now, we can always,
Sure.
you don't have to answer this. And
No worries.
Jay, when you're listening to this section and you cut it, like it's all good if we need to cut it.
Mhm.
I'm talking to my podcast engineer as he's listening to this, but um, so I overheard when you and Gats were in Chandran Gallery together.
Mhm.
And this is something that I doubt anybody has asked you the question about. Um, illegal trouble. Does
Mhm.
that mean anything to you? The illegal trouble crew. Does that
Yes.
mean anything to you? Like I want to because like I know Monica shows up in a lot of your work.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, you talked about psych and how like the fake detective or the fake psychic detective or whatever, that's kind of like my fake detective work.
Yeah.
And me always being curious about this and like hanging around a bunch of homies that do graph and things like that.
Mhm.
And I've heard Gat's story about illegal trouble. I'm curious like what your story is or your connection to that is, and any
I mean,
fun
I
things that
think,
you could talk about.
yeah. I mean, I basically just know that crew as just like a few friends, a couple of friends, artists, and it almost just for me it's like an atmosphere that you just are sometimes in, like, okay, that's you'll start seeing little IT pops up on things, and it's they're just friends. And I think it's, you know there's a there's definitely a spirit um that's really been alive in my life. I actually think that I'm kind of like shy and maybe like a little timid, and so I like to find people that are not. I like to find people that want to get into trouble. And then I want to be like, can I get, not always. Sometimes there's bad trouble, but sometimes there's really fun trouble. And there's friends that just know how to do it. And they're just like, okay. And whenever I'm around those people is when I'm like, okay, now we're breaking into the thing. And now we're climbing the fence. Now we're doing the exploration, whatever, getting into the whole messes. And so it's like, I'm not like a magician of that kind of stuff. My specialty is staying at home in my sweatpants, making drawings, boring as fuck. Like that's my specialty. And so I need people in my life who have this other specialty, which is like getting into trouble and fun.
That's awesome. When I've talked to Gats about illegal trouble, one thing that stands out to me is like they coined the phrase illegal trouble because most people will say, "Well, I'm having legal trouble," but how funny would it be to say, "Well, like we're actually having illegal trouble," and so yeah. So anyway, like shout out to Gats. I hope you don't kill me if you hear this, and I love you, man. So a couple other questions that I wanted to make sure that we ask with shelter in place,
Mhm.
with the effects of COVID. A lot of different artists that we've had an opportunity to connect with, and I feel like this podcast was born because of COVID, because everyone's in their studio spaces now, and like galleries are shut down, and there's just more time. How are
Yeah.
you dealing with the pandemic, and how has it affected any of the work that you're doing, and you know
Mhm.
how's everything going with
Yeah.
that?
Well, first of all, I'm counting myself incredibly lucky in this moment. I feel really fortunate to have a creative practice. I've really, I don't know, I just am like really counting my lucky stars that I feel that somehow this moment has been really positive for me. When the shutdown first started, I don't think I understood how exhausted I was. I think I was exhausted like to the bone in a way that I couldn't have understood. And I sheltered in place by myself for almost 2 months. before going down to live for the summer with my boyfriend in Florida, which was awesome. And but at first it would everyone was just, I was just in New York, and everyone was like, I don't know, don't fly, just stay put. And I was shocked at how much it like filled my spirit to just be able to like just sit still and to draw. And then the next thing I did over the summer, I went down to Florida, and I ended up just reading. I read like almost, I don't know, 10 years of old journals, because I've done the morning pages every morning for like 20 years.
Wow.
So I was like, I think I'm gonna write a memoir at some point. So let me like start this work. Let me start like going through these journals. And so I was just reading back through all this like years and years of stuff. It really felt like getting a second processing of my life. I imagined it like the second cold pressing of olive oil or something. I was like, oh, I'm running it through again, getting that wisdom out. Um, and then since then, I was actually able to complete a large installation at the Albright Knox in Buffalo, which I feel so lucky about. And then I've actually started a public art project, and I think I can talk about it because we're not, this podcast isn't going to go public. They haven't announced it yet, but this podcast won't go until it's announced. So I'm actually working with PBS on they have this incredible thing that they started called American Portrait. And it's this story portal where like tens of thousands of people are giving these kind of testimonials and stories and answering these story prompts, like the tradition I carry forward is, or, a challenge I've overcome, or what family means to me, all these different kinds of questions. And they're answering these questions. And then PBS is working with 3 artists to do public art projects like around the country that are sort of amplify this. And like I was saying, I was working with the Million Person Project. Like, I love storytelling. I believe so much in the power of storytelling, and that's why I was asking you about your story, because I
Yep.
just think us sharing is it. And so when
Yep.
they asked me to do this, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm obsessed with storytelling. I love getting people together to tell stories. And so the thing I proposed was, it's a sculpture called The House Our Families Built, and it's this kind of, it's actually a box truck that's going to travel around the city, and then it's
Dope.
going to open up into this kind of spatio confusing sort of home sculpture. And
I saw the photo. I saw
ah,
I
that's what it is. Yeah. But that's okay, because that's what it is. I haven't said what it is yet. I just keep sharing these photos, and people are like, what are you doing? That's what it is.
I saw
um
the front of the box
Truck.
like this
Yes.
way, and it's got like all the pattern on the front. I was like,
Yep.
yo, that's
We're
sick.
working on that. Yeah, so that's gonna start going around New York City at the end of January.
Dope.
And it's like COVID times, public art in COVID times, so it's kind of crazy, but we're figuring it out. We're just like, figuring out how to work and live around it. And my friend Jeff Stark has gone like a deep dive into the site, and he's made a performance like built out of all these different testimonials. And so it's this piece of public art that's about storytelling. It's about I'm sort of taking on a few questions that are like, what is the legacy that I choose to leave behind? And thinking about, like, over this summer, everyone trying to understand, how do we let go of our nation's legacy of white supremacy? How do we grow
Dope.
past that? And so I've been sort of looking into the ways that my own family history is like directly related to the legacy of white supremacy, and thinking about, how do we actively let go of those legacies? How do we say goodbye to those ancestral histories, or acknowledge them and grieve them and let them go? And so
Yep.
that's like one of the things we're thinking about with the project. We're also thinking about trauma and addiction, and also the loving things, the recipes, the food. What from our families do we choose to keep? And so that's what I'm working on. Even though we're in the middle of all this pandemic and this shutdown, I'm somehow still managing to make this really publicly engaged and engaging work through these videos. We're going to do workshops, and then we're going to also have the truck, all willing. The truck will be outside. And I think that it might be a great way for people to see art, because maybe you don't want to be in museums right now, but you
Yep.
can still go outside and experience this public sculpture.
That's so dope. Man, I can't wait to see what happens, or when it comes to fruition and you guys have it all out there. And of course would love to find a way to time this at the time that you can
Mhm.
actually,
Yeah, that'd be great.
broadcast that. Oh, okay. So this is kind of a weird side note, and this is this person
Yeah.
again
Mhm.
asking this question. So Swiss Beats
Yeah.
was on a TED Talks podcast for art,
Mhm.
and something that he said really inspired me. He has talked about he was it was him specifically and talking about how as a musician with licensing for all of his music, he
Mhm.
gets paid a royalty every time that a commercial's using his music, every time his music is sampled or whatever. Artists don't have that luxury. Like
Mm.
an artist that does a painting, creates a painting, and then once it's sold, it leaves the artist's hands and they no longer can get anything from it, right? And
Mhm.
he was talking about his experience with one of the world's, I don't even know how to describe it, but basically the living today African American artist that has work that's out there that's like the most like valued painting or whatever. And he said he was standing next to the artist who had
Yeah.
originally sold the painting to P. Diddy for $100,000 or something. And here's Sotheby's now selling it for 20 million or something.
Mhm.
And Swiss asks the artist, so what do you, man, you just became that artist. How do you feel? And he's like, I don't know if I should cry or if I should be happy because,
Right.
like I sold it for 100K, but like after cost of materials and like, like
Yeah.
Diddy just made and Sotheby's just made,
Yep.
and so you're thinking about this, right? So it made myself and my homie Jay, who shout out to you, Jay, and mentioning our work here because it's come on, it's Cali, right? So we're talking about this, and we are actually actively trying in experimental design lab mode, trying to figure out a way for where an artist sells a painting, a
Mhm.
physical work of art,
Yeah.
and if it exchanges hands through cryptocurrency and smart contracts to
Mm.
find a way that you would get paid every single time that this changes hands.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard or talked to anybody about this, or if, with all the galleries that you've
Not
connected with
really.
it.
I think I've heard the concept, but I've never really heard anyone who was working on it. Um, but I do think it's really brilliant because, this can happen that artists whose work is like, having these moments and the artist can still be totally broke. Um,
Yep,
and
exactly.
and so to try to design in ways that artists don't go through that, I think is totally brilliant, and really worth doing.
So we're working on that, and you can tell Swiss if
Okay.
he ever listens to this. Yo,
Yeah,
shout out Swiss.
yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah.
inspired by his conversation
That's
with
great. No, I
that
think
TED
he'd be
Talks.
curious to know about that. He's such an interesting person. Just like side note, I heard this story years ago about Bill Clinton, which is that Bill Clinton would be in a room and like 10 different people would be talking, trying to talk to him, and they would all think that he wasn't listening to them. And then all of a sudden he'd say something that will let you know that he actually heard all 10 people. And I see Swiss do that. And you're like, oh my God, like he just heard all that and he's processing it all. The amount of information he can balance in his head is wild. So I think he would be curious to hear what you're up to.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, we're still in the development stages, and there's one artist when we launch our design lab website, which I'll put you on our newsletter so you can see what we're doing. There's one artist specifically that we were only going to sell his work through crypto and smart contracts if
Mhm.
we do this the right way. And the rest of the artists in this group show that we're launching is going to have just the traditional way that you can buy through PayPal and
Mhm.
credit card or whatever. So more on that later. All right, last couple of questions. The project that you wanted to discuss, this was the project, right? The one that
Yeah,
that's
the
that's
truck.
happening with
Mhm.
PBS.
Yeah.
Okay. And then all right, this is the last question. Last two questions.
Mhm.
The second to last question is Wikipedia states that the name Swoon,
Mhm.
and I will reference the reference in this link. It says Curry created the name Swoon because of a dream her boyfriend had about the two of them doing graffiti and running from the cops. She adopted the name and began tagging her work as Swoon instead of leaving it anonymous, which she previously had done most
Mhm.
of her street art. Is that exactly how the name came?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I Yeah, I was working, I was doing stuff anonymously, and then I got I got the sense that I wanted to have a name from Bast. Do you know the artist Bast? He's an
Mm-mm.
amazing street artist, and he had a bunch of different things, and I was like, "Oh, I love that thing. I love that thing. I love that thing." And then I realized they were all the same person, and I got so excited. And it was the first time I realized that a name didn't have to be just about ego, that it could also be about being in
Yeah.
a conversation. And I was like, ding, okay, I do want that. Because I was like, oh, a name is just ego, blah, blah, whatever. So then I was like, no, actually, that's cool. That's like showing up in the conversation. And so then I was like, well, you can't choose your name. Your name has to choose you. I don't know why I think that. It's like I just thought that was, but then I remembered this dream that my boyfriend at the time had, which was that, yeah, I was a graffiti writer at Swoon, so on. And he was like, it was such a beautiful word. I woke up thinking what a beautiful word it was. And so, yeah, I just remembered it. And, it was something that had happened years before. At the time, I was like, I would never do graffiti. And then, like, years later, I was like, oh, I would.
That's so cool. And then when did you become, I mean, because for the longest time, you were underground. You never like your work was just in the street. It was known as your work. When
Mhm.
did you decide to go above ground and show your face and say, in fact, I am a woman,
Yeah.
motherfucker?
Yeah, I think I was thinking the other day, I often wonder, you've wondered about your own actions. And, I definitely hid my gender at first. And I hid it first. I just thought, I was like, I don't fucking care. It's not what I want to talk about. I just want to make this art. Right. That was like what I kind of primarily believed. But in fact, I think that I intuitively understood the level of sexism that was still at play, that's still at play today. The sort of implicit bias, like they talk about those, there's these like studies out now where like they'll show like some collectors some art and be like, it's like made up, and it'll be like, here's this art and here's this artist's name, and they'll have them rate like which one's the best and which one's the most valuable, and they rate the most valuable and best work as the ones that have obviously male names. And they're doing it subconsciously. Like, it's not, nobody's like waking up in the morning being like, I hate women and I'm going to oppress them. It's just like built into your psyche is this belief that if a woman did it, it's probably not as good. And so I think, and we have to overcome that, just like we have to overcome all of our inbuilt white supremacy, all these things that we just
Yep.
we have to be like, this got programmed into our psyches by the society that we live in, and we have to uproot that shit. And so
Yep.
I think kind of understanding that there was a way in which I wasn't going to be perceived with as much seriousness if I immediately revealed myself as a woman. I think I did like a J.K. Rowling or like any of those any of those authors that for centuries have, if you're a woman, you don't sign your name, you do an initial, because
Mhm.
you want to be taken seriously, and that won't happen if you show up as a woman. And while I really want to change that, at the time I was so young and I was just acting instinctively. And I think I was just like, just let me get out here. Like, if you can just see my work, you'll fucking see. And so, yeah, I kind of hid a little. And then eventually I was like, turns out I'm a woman, and people were great. People were so sweet about it. Once people did find out, because that's why they call it implicit sexism. It's not like nobody's
Yeah.
sitting around being like, I hate women. Like, once they found out as a woman, they were like, amazing. Like,
Yeah.
people were super supportive. And so, yeah, that's kind of slowly happened. And then, I think it's like growth. Like, you start out and you're like, I make street art for this reason. But like the person that you were 5 years ago, the person you are 5 years later, I mean, we change so much. We grow, we need to shift, and we need to learn
Yep.
different things. And so what I found is that working out on the street fulfilled one aspect of who I was, but that there were all these other aspects that also were asking to be fulfilled. And so when people started to ask me, do you want to make this museum show, this gallery show, I had a little bit of gut check about it. I felt kind of different ways, but eventually I was like, if I'm going to grow, I need to give myself all these opportunities that are coming toward me. And so, the big one happened in 2005 when Jeffrey Deitch reached out to me, and I did this huge solo show in New York City. And that was the same year MoMA bought a couple pieces of my work. So all this stuff started to happen all at once, and I just went with it.
So amazing. Yeah, I I think I read that article or watched one of the interviews where you talked about that, and it was like from this, like you had all these articles around that time that said from the street to the museum, and
Yes.
it's like,
Mhm.
oh my God, this is
It was
crazy,
it was epic.
amazing.
I'm reading back through my journals of it. I'm like, yo, how are you not? I was freaking out. I remember like working on my show, like just weeping because so many different things were happening to me and I didn't understand, I was so young. I was like what's going on, so that even when the things are amazing, you're just freaking out. You're like, what's
Yeah.
happening, And I was just like weeping, like, what's going on in my life? I'm like, this is not really good, but I'm freaking out.
Oh my God. That was so, I would have loved to be your friend at that time to like pat you on the shoulder and say,
Yeah.
Callie, just take it in. Just take it in. This
Yes,
is amazing.
yes.
Look at all of this. Look at this. This is
Yeah.
amazing.
And when friends can do that, it's so special, because there are also friends that can't. When you have success, there will be friends that have a hard time with that. And so those friends that are able to just show up and be supportive are so fucking incredible. And
Yep.
shout out to all those friends because yes, they
Yeah.
were my everything. And you talk about, you say like, oh, you've done all this different work over the 20 years. And the thought that pops into my head is I would have done none of it without the people that are around me. It couldn't have happened. One person alone can't do these
Yep.
things. You have to work in community and work together, and it's the
Yep.
only way.
Is there any, I mean, man, you work with so many people. So I'm like, is there a list? Like, it's the Grammys, you got the mic. How many people do you
I got it, can't. It's so unfair because then you at the Grammys you always
Yeah.
forget somebody and then you're in
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah. But yo, all of you guys listening to this was for you. Like
This
she's
is
talking
for
about
you.
all of you guys.
Anybody who has been in any way involved in any of the projects that I've worked on over the years. And I've worked on so many projects that, I mean,
Yeah.
we're literally talking about a community of thousands of people if you include every single person who's ever just been supportive in any tiny way.
Yeah.
And all of those people are all doing their own things as well. That's what's so cool is like in the last couple of years, I've been like seeing these moments, like people who worked with me on, for just an example of two things. Robin Frohart just did this incredible play in Times Square. She's doing all this, it's called the Plastic Bag Store, and it's all about garbage and plastic and our relationship to the future. And then another friend of mine, Todd Chandler, just made this film that came out about gun violence. And just being like, we've all been involved in each other's projects in all these different ways, and they were involved in the rafts and part of this community and helped out on so many things. And then to watch people who have been a part of projects now just like boom come out and and have these incredible epic works of art that come out or create just all the people that have been involved have also just done things that like blow me away, like each in their every way, whether it's like starting a bakery, whatever people are doing. It's like, oh my god, like we're all on this journey, we're all doing this work, and it's showing up in all these different ways.
The thing that I always ask everybody at the end of every podcast is for the youth that may be following your work,
Mm-hmm.
the future generations to come, my daughter, Jessie Luna, who
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure when she gets old enough will be able to watch this. Maybe she's watching it, I love you so much. Who, what would you say to the youth of today that may be fans of your work? And what would you say as your last message to anybody else out there? There's a two-part question.
Wow. Okay. Gosh, it's weird. I haven't thought about that. I think that to the youth when they're growing up, I would say that, all the stuff that we've been talking about is essentially about becoming conscious. And there's all of this, a piece of becoming conscious is feeling your feelings, experiencing them, moving through them. And there are all of these tools, journaling and meditation and creativity and community and that I think maybe kind of most of all, I would say that, we talked about kind of finding the spiritual core, how like in materialist reality, 2 + 2 keeps ending up to be 3.9, and you're like, that's not enough. I'm at a deficit. And so I guess the thing that I would say is find the thing that makes your cup overflow, that makes
Mm,
there always be more than enough time, energy, love, um, and that reality and that this life is malleable. You know, you sort of talked about, like, make a joke about the Oracle and the Matrix, right? But I do think that there is a way, when we get into our zone and we get into our groove, that there's a way in which I sometimes feel like I'm waking up in a dream. Like, I feel like I'm going lucid in my day-to-day life, where I'm like, whoa, am I waking up in this? I'm already awake, you know? And it's only like a little feeling. It's this little feeling, you know,
Yep.
but it makes me think, and how it feels is, it feels like I've got like a hot point, and I can sort of just like shift the world around me a little. I can get a little more space, I can get a little more time, you know, I can breathe into things a little more. And I think that for me so far has been the result of doing my healing work, of confronting my pain, of digging into it, of grieving what I need to grieve, of putting the time and energy into myself, of meditating, of having the hard conversations, and then of believing that there's more to this life. And so I guess I would say find what makes you believe that there's more to this life.
Beautiful.
I would say same answer, both questions.
Yep. Awesome. Beautiful. Beautiful. I want to cry, but I'm gonna do it like once we stop recording because it's just amazing. It would be tears of joy. And I would say I would say there's no better way to start a new year after the craziness of 2020, after man, like literally almost 3 years of being able to have this pause and then to come back into this space and to have a one-on-one conversation. Like I before we had this conversation, my friend May called me and was like, "What are you up to?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm up to a lot. And by the way, I'm freaking out a little bit because I'm gonna like actually talk to one of my favorite artists." It's like when you're that kid in basketball camp in junior high and you get to actually talk to Michael Jordan. Yeah, that's how I feel. So you know,
Yes. Am I Michael Jordan right now?
you
Yes.
are Michael Jordan. Slam dunk. Yeah, I just got to see the All-Star game, and I didn't have to pay for it. It's awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
But yo,
so much. I really love the work that you're doing. I'm
thank you.
totally inspired by your willingness to just be honest, to share, to make yourself better, to make a better life for your daughter.
Thank
And
you.
I just feel like what you're doing is about trying to help all of us be more real and be better, and that's it. That's what's up.
Yeah. That's what's up.
Glad to
It's
be a
the
part of it.
community. Yeah. No, totally. Glad to have you part of this as well. Everyone else, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Find out more about Swoon's work on all the links that we have listed below. Swoon, thank you so very much for
Thank
all your
you.
time, your energy, your effort. You're an amazing human being, artist, friend. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. It's just amazing.
Hell yeah. All right, big hugs to you and the whole
Thank you so
fam
much.
and all the friends in the Bay, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yep. Sounds good. Take care.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye. Thank you for listening. It's listeners like you who continue to make our work possible. Thank you for supporting our community of method makers worldwide. Remember to subscribe and continue to share our work with your friends and family. Be sure to check out all the links below, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.